Welcome to the Ad Nauseam Podcast, where classical gourmands everywhere can finally get their fill. Join us for a delectable discussion of Greco-Roman civilization stretching from the Minoans and Mycenaeans through the Renaissance and right down to the present. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here are your hosts, Dr. David Noe and Dr. Jeff Winkle.
Welcome, Ad Nauseam listeners, to episode 138. My name is Dr. David C. Noe. I am here in the Vomitorium South, on a frosty January morning, and I'm here with my fabulous co-host, Dr. Jeffrey T. Winkle. How are you this morning, Jeff?
I'm doing really well. I think as I was talking to you before we switched the button on, is that getting a little restless towards the end of the Christmas vacation.
A little antsy.
Right. The kids are kind of climbing the walls, and so
Sure.
I think I'm ready. And even if my kids wouldn't admit it, they're ready to go back to school.
They wouldn't admit it,
no.
But let's get Dad out the door.
Yeah, exactly right.
And let's get back to business.
No, he's driving everybody crazy.
That's right.
Right.
Too much leisure.
Too much
right?
leisure. Yeah,
Makes Jeff a dull boy.
Exactly.
All right.
Yep. Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, I'm completely recovered in health, which is a great thing.
Yep.
I've got some intensive teaching the next few weeks.
Oh, you do?
Yes, teaching here in Grand Rapids at a seminary, and then jetting off to a fabulous Southern California.
Oh, you did tell me about that.
To teach basically the same class at another institution.
Yes, but in much balmier, sunnier weather.
That's right. The climbs will be good, I think.
Man.
So I'm, going around collecting all my materials, hammering out the lectures, searching for things.
Yes.
Sometimes I search for something, and this is a setup for a bad joke. You can tell.
Yeah.
I search for something and I look, and it turns out that I can't find it. Right?
Yeah.
You know what that's called, right?
What is that?
Well,
called?
when you search for something and it's kind of a fool's errand.
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm talking about?
I don't know what you're talking about.
It involves waterfowl.
Water. You're trying to get your ducks in a row?
No. It's in the search involving something larger than a duck, another kind of waterfowl.
It's a wild goose chase?
Yes, exactly. But I would say that for me, these are mostly like domestic goose chases.
Domestic goose chase.
Exactly. And there's the joke.
So just local geese. Gotcha.
It's not quite as bad as a wild goose chase. It's a domestic goose chase.
I hear you. Yeah.
So if we can just analyze that pedantically for a moment.
Okay.
Up until just a few weeks ago, my whole life I had assumed that the adjective wild there modifies chase.
Now that you bring it up, that was my assumption as well.
So it's a goose chase, but it's a wild chase.
The chase is wild.
The chase is wild.
Right.
You're chasing a goose, and the chase is wild because who knows where it's going.
Right.
I've now come to the conclusion that wild modifies goose, and goose modifies chase. Because if you're chasing a domestic goose,
right,
no problem.
That's right.
But chasing a wild goose?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a problem that English has with its adjectives.
You're right.
Just right across,
stack them up.
Right across the street from where we are right now, there's a sign advertising a giant book sale.
Yes.
As you walk in, there's just one huge book in there, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Giant book sale.
Right. Except
only one person can purchase it.
You don't have this problem in Latin and Greek.
You don't.
No.
Because of inflectional morphology, shall we say.
That's right.
Yeah. So all my goose chases, I keep domestic.
Yeah.
And
that sounds like a smart idea.
It removes a lot of problems.
Yep.
All right, so we have, what are we doing today, Jeff?
Oh, I'm really excited about today. We are interviewing the great Caroline Lawrence.
Yes.
The children's author who is one of these wonderful people who is keeping the flame of Catholics.
That's correct.
Classics alive.
There you go.
And bringing the ancient world to a popular audience.
Yes, and she's going to be coming to us from jolly old England.
That's right, yeah.
Through the wonders of Zoom.
Yep.
And this woman is a fantastic authoress and has been so successful and has so graciously agreed to come on the program and tell us what it's like to write fiction for children.
Yep.
Tell us I'd really like to know this. Tell us what it's like to be successful.
Right, exactly right.
That's incredible.
And she, in terms of her academic pedigree, she's got a legit classics pedigree.
She's the real deal.
She is the real deal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Caroline Lawrence, we're going to welcome her in just a few moments. But first, Jeff, we have a shout out. Can you give us that?
Yeah, this comes from a former student of mine. Did you ever have?
Yeah, I did. Not for as many courses as you, but
yeah, this Katria Jade.
Could you say that name again? Because that's an unusual and beautiful name, may I add.
Katria Jade is her name. Yes. And I remember her very well. She sat right in the front row of my intro Latin class, and really bright student, and got stuck with me through at least kind of like 2.5, 3 years of Latin.
Incredible.
And she was one of those students that just clicked. She got it right away.
Ate it up.
She ended up coming on a January J-term trip to Italy and just devoured it.
Excellent.
Yep. And so she writes to us, and it was great. It was great to hear from her. She says, after graduating, she lived down in Alabama for about 7 years and has recently come back to West Michigan. And while she was down there, she worked at a family-owned jewelry store. And kind of the idea was that it was just going to be something temporary and part-time. And she fell in love with it, with the job, with the people. And now back in Michigan, she works in local Granville, which is just a few miles down the road from here. And she works at Ingalls Jewelry, a family-owned jewelry store.
Shout out to Ingalls Jewelry Company.
Yes, exactly.
Right. If they want to become a sponsor,
yeah, right.
We could hawk diamonds.
Right. So she loves it. And this doesn't surprise me. She was always very much a people person, and kind of working with people, different people every day. And she writes this, my Latin knowledge actually did help me once a while back. I had a couple who wanted to do a Latin engraving on their wedding bands, but the inscription they chose was too long to fit. I helped adjust the wording to make it shorter without changing the meaning.
Sweet. They
didn't believe me until I translated and explained the grammar. Oh, I love that. It was a while ago and I can't remember the phrase, but I do remember the looks they gave me and my bosses too. It made me laugh. The catch, of course, is that there was no one there to check me, so let's hope I did it right.
Yeah, well, Katria, first, I'm sure you did it just fine. And second, the inscription might be on the inside of the band, hidden next to the person's finger.
Yeah.
Right? So no one's ever going to know.
Right. Exactly.
But I'm sure you did it right.
Yeah. So, so today she says she loves spending time with her dogs, writing, reading. She also wrote to us another email that she has another friend that she graduated with who was also a lover of the classics.
Aaron Coster.
And they are both, and this most importantly of all, they are both big fans of the podcast.
Yes. You say that's the most important thing?
That they love the podcast?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Right. Can I read a little bit of this?
Sure.
Because I like this part.
Okay.
My love of the classics often has me rambling to my housemates about the universal nature of storytelling. And on one memorable occasion, giving a slightly tipsy explanation of dactylic hexameter. I assume by that she means she was standing on one foot.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Right.
Iambic pentameter and oral tradition. I am not sure they were prepared for this. I was advertised as comes with its dogs rather than we'll start talking about scansion after having one beer. And then she ends with a really nice joke.
Yes.
You can take the girl out of academia, but not the academia out of the girl, maybe?
Right.
Yeah.
So, it was, thank you, Katria, for listening. Thanks for being a great student, and it was wonderful to hear from you.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you so much for keeping the flame alive out there, even in the jewelry business.
Indeed. Love it. Yep.
All right. Well, Jeff, I think that's it. And let's welcome Caroline to the show.
Perhaps you all know her already, but Caroline is a very successful author of a children's literature fiction based on the ancient world, the Roman Mysteries series. I have been reading those for a few days now, doing my homework, and they're absolutely fascinating. Jeff?
Yeah, this is as Dave and I were just talking just before we opened up the Zoom, is that one of the things that we love about people like you, Caroline, is that you're one of these people that is keeping the flame alive and bringing the classical world to a new audience, to a young audience, and it's what we're striving to do on this podcast. And so I think one of the questions Dave says I want to ask her is Caroline, we love what you're doing. We're trying to do the same thing, but how are you successful in doing that?
Yeah.
The reason I'm successful is pure dumb luck.
Yes, Fortuna, right, strikes us all.
And also having the mindset of an 11-year-old, I think. And I fell in love with classics when I think about the age you guys did too, in my late teens.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I was about 17 or 18, and I read a book by Mary Renault called The Last of the Wine.
Oh, yeah.
If you haven't read it, it's brilliant. And it's historical fiction set in the time of Socrates and Plato and Xenophon, but it's got two fictional main characters. And I think it was written in the late 50s or early 60s. But anyway, I read it when I was about 18, and it just blew my mind. And that I was on my gap year, and the same month I read the Iliad in translation, E.V. Rude, the Penguin.
Yes, I know that one. Yep.
And I thought something written 800 BC cannot sound this modern.
Yeah.
I've got to sign up for Greek and see if it really is. So when I went to UC Berkeley and started at UC Berkeley after my gap year, I signed up for ancient Greek just on a whim.
Hmm.
And we had this great teacher called W. Gerson Rabinowitz, who would sit in a cloud of Marlboro smoke. That tells you how long ago that was. Ask us to parse Greek verbs, which is, of course, as you know, analyzing them grammatically. And we were terrified, but we loved it.
Yeah.
And then I loved it. And I think one of the reasons I love ancient languages and Greek, starting with ancient Greek, is it's like a code or a puzzle. And when you decode it, the reward is that you are in the head of someone who lived thousands of years ago, and you're in that world.
Yes.
And you can see it and hear it and smell it. And it's just amazing. It's mind-blowing. And so they said, well, if you like ancient Greek, you have to do Latin. We call it classics. And
That's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I'd always loved the Greek myths because my parents were quite, arty and intellectual, and they had Greek myth books and art books lying around. So
Sure.
I never looked back really, and I've loved classics ever since. I ended up coming to England on a Marshall scholarship to study at Cambridge, at Newnham College, Cambridge. And when I got here to England, oh my gosh, everybody was so far ahead of me as far as the languages, because some of them have been studying since they were 7 or 8.
Right, sure. Right. At places like Eton, right, and Harrow and things like that.
Places like Eton and Harrow and Winchester and all these choir schools and stuff. So I felt like the dumb one. But and in fact, I think I realized that then academia was not for me. I took a break to get married, have a kid. Started to help out as a teacher at his school, just volunteering, and did little art classes. And they said, oh, you're great. You can teach. It was an independent school. I didn't need a teaching degree. What would you like to teach? Teach anything. And I said, well, I'd love to teach a taster of Latin to the kids. And these are kids 9, 10, and 11. So we used to do what's called the Cambridge Latin course, which is this. It was that orange, Caecilius est in horto and everything.
Yeah, sure.
And I had so much fun. And cut a long story short, I loved teaching, but it was exhausting. I thought, I've got to actually write books that will transport kids to the ancient world, and get them interested the way that Mary Renault sparked my interest. So I just happened to time it at the time when Harry Potter books were taking off.
So this was the late 90s, 2001 around then?
Actually, I got the idea in 1999 at the end of the summer holiday. And I'd gone home to visit my sister in California, and I was telling her I love movies and I wanted to write a screenplay. And she said, "Why do you write books for kids? You teach kids." And I suddenly had this light bulb moment. Nancy Drew, in ancient Rome. So, and it was this mashup, and I thought if I can do a kid girl detective, because Harry's a boy and he's the hero, I'm going to have a girl hero. She solves mysteries in the ancient world. And in doing that, I can slide in all the knowledge and transport my readers to that world. And the dumb luck was that I just caught that wave when all kids were now reading because of J.K. Rowling, and they wanted book series. And so that was the dumb luck, really.
Yeah. So that's a wonderful intro to what I think is going to be a fantastic discussion. I'm looking at the inside cover of Thieves of Ostia, which is the one that I just finished this morning. And now I'm almost done with Queen of the Silver Arrow. And I have lined up also Murders in Rome, I think, and also The Assassin of Rome. But on the inside cover of the Thieves of Ostia, there's this very nice review from The Independent. And it says, packed with adventure, effortlessly deployed with detail culled from Pliny and Juvenal. Enjoyable entertainment. So I read that, and then as I'm reading through the story, I was looking for those little hints of things from Pliny and Juvenal, and they were really well. They were really well placed. They never overshadowed the story. But I was trying to think as I read it, if I were a kid again, which I'd like to be, but with current life experience and knowledge, how would this how would this feel as I read these details? And I came to the conclusion that it would feel very natural. It would be kind of engrossing. So can you say a little bit more about how you chose the specific details and what shaped some of that background, which is so plausible?
Absolutely. Well, if you like the mention of Pliny, we meet him in the second book, The Secret of the Secret. He actually becomes their mentor, and he gives them a talisman, the hero's journey kind of storytelling template. Well, when my sister said a book for kids set in ancient Rome, I immediately thought Pompeii. What's the most exciting thing that ever happened in ancient Rome? And so immediately I don't just have a year, it's been slightly bumped now, but I had a date and a month, the 24th of August, AD 79. So that plunks me firmly in a time slot. So I'm researching who was the emperor then. Titus, just become emperor. Vespasian had died, and then his evil younger brother is going to become emperor soon. Yeah. So that's what put me in the late first century AD. The lovely quote from The Independent says, effortlessly deployed. And whenever it says effortlessly, there's a heck of a lot of work behind.
Right.
And they got one thing wrong. It's not Juvenal. My inspiration is Martial.
Oh, yeah.
And he's the one who writes really rude verses. In fact, if he was around today, he'd be writing the equivalent of Sex in the City,
Right.
But he has all these little tweet-length epigrams.
Yeah, that's right. The king of the two-liner, right? Yeah.
The king of the two-liner, which is just my wavelength. That's my man. It's two lines. But apart from his rude stuff, which is very rude, he is, I think, the best. He's the best at describing the sensory world of ancient Rome, the taste, the touch, the smells, the gifts. His book of the gifts you give at the Saturnalia has each little gifts, the cheap gifts, the cheap mattress, the feather mattress, the cheapest kind of cloak, the most expensive kind of cloak, what it's made of, what it smells like, all this stuff. And so I just love Martial, and he actually makes a cameo later in the books too. I mean, he was a horrible person. He was an anti-Semitic misogynist,
Right.
I do love his stuff.
Right. Or at least he presents himself as one. It's so hard to know whether these, same as Catullus, whether they really believed what they were saying. I don't know. It's delivered for so much effect to an audience. But yeah, some of the things he says are outrageous.
I have a question. So you can correct me if I get some of these details wrong. But so when you went to Cambridge, you changed your track towards archaeology. Is that correct?
Essentially, archaeology, what that means is art and looking at pictures of Greek vases and statues. Yeah. Got you.
And I think I read in another interview that you ended up on one dig and you decided you hated it. And decided.
So where was that?
Oh, that was fascinating. I was so ungrateful. I was invited on a dig by a great English archaeologist who's passed on named Graham Webster, and it was in a place called Wroxeter, which is up near Wales. I mean, I'm still not clear on English geography. It's up there. And there was a Roman fort up there. And so I went up, and, you're kneeling in the dirt, in the rain and the wind and stuff.
Right.
And communal showers, communal bunks, and that was a revelation.
It's like being an undergrad again, but it
was even more so. But I had one moment which was great. I was digging and I found a roof tile, the way they laid them out to dry, and it had the paw print of a dog on it. Yeah.
Oh wow.
But I've seen so many tiles in the 40 years since then with animal prints. I'm sure they did that on purpose, actually. It's to keep away evil. It's to distract people.
Oh, sure.
You get an animal to run across exactly, apotropaic, my favorite word. But I realized at that moment that I was going to be an armchair classicist. Not get out there with. And then I read somewhere someone went on a dig in Israel, which at first sounded great, but when they started talking about bugs in the food, I thought, nope, no way.
You didn't listen to our rant about insectivores a few weeks ago, perhaps, but Maybe someday if you'd like to. So, Carol, go ahead.
Where I wanted to go with that. So, I mean, despite kind of your experience with kind of, hands-on archaeology in writing a story where you're setting it in Pompeii, I'm wondering if time that you spent perhaps at Pompeii and your kind of experience with kind of the archaeological finds and just so you talked about how Marshall as a literary influence, but how about like the material influences on your writing and how you put together a story? If you could talk a bit about that. Yeah.
Material culture is paramount. And although I don't do archaeology, I am so grateful for all my archaeologist friends who do it.
Yeah.
Get out there and dig in the wet and the cold and the rain and the
right
mud and the heat and the
with
dust.
a toothbrush on one square meter for 2 years.
And so, although I don't dig, I go and I visit these places and I walk around them. And one of the reasons I set my series in Ostia is it's one of the most magical places I've ever been. It's got a real sense of magic about it. If you've ever been?
Agreed.
Yes, we have a couple of times together even. Mm-hmm. So
fantastic.
Yes, fantastic. In some ways, I like it even better than Pompeii in terms of
something about it, and it may be that it's not as busy, that it's more deserted, but those beautiful umbrella pines and the snow, and the light as it filters in. And so I go to sites and I try to get a feel for the geography, the atmosphere, the feel of the sun, what birds would be around, what wildflowers.
Mm-hmm.
I will eat what maybe they eat in the cheaper restaurants, stuff they've eaten for thousands of years. I will go to museums. I just hang around museums all the time and look at the artifacts. And I don't go to the bling. I don't go to the gold and stuff. I go to the little oil lamps, which are almost like postcards from the past that show you what they're obsessed with. And especially, I am so blessed. I live in London. I can be at the British Museum in half an hour.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
Yeah. The vase is there. I've had to
Russell Square.
Exactly. I've had to teach myself to say vase in England instead of vase. American.
You got to fit in. So
the vases are just works of art. And even the crude, clumsy ones are, again, a glimpse into the past. And then, so I use all those things. I go to museums. I talk to experts. And London it's got not just museums, but it is Roman. London was founded by the Romans. And they recently, 5 years ago, they opened a temple to Mithras in the basement of Bloomberg's London headquarters.
Seriously.
And you can go down underground, because you always go down to go back in time.
Right.
You go about 30 feet underground, and they've got the foundations of a temple to Mithras. And when you're down there, they suddenly turn out all the lights. And when they bring the lights up, they've filled the room with steam, and they use lights to replicate the walls and the columns of the temple. And you hear people speaking in Latin, and it's an immersive experience. So London.
Now, do they then drench you in bull's blood at that time?
That's a fallacy. They didn't.
Oh.
That's the Magna Mater that they might have done that with.
Okay.
But they didn't even sacrifice a bull. If you sacrificed a bull in a temple that small, in fact, they're always underground with no lights.
Sure.
Right.
It would just go berserk, So they didn't sacrifice a bull, but they do have this iconic statue of Mithras
slaying the bull.
Yeah.
Well,
you'd have a communal meal down there, right? You
would exactly. And I know the archaeologist who designed this. And she said they were half thinking of having the smell of chicken piped in, because they found lots of chicken bones.
That's fantastic.
No, wait. People will think there's a Colonel Sanders or a
I was going to say,
nearby.
There's a lot of KFCs in London, if I remember. So
this temple that they found there was a sculpture with the bull slaying motif that was all there intact.
Well, they found it. They were digging foundations in 1954. London was still in a bomb site because of the Blitz. There were still buildings, especially in the city of London, which is the Roman part, the center of London, the financial center. And they were digging foundations of a new building. And on the last day of digging, they found this beautiful marble head of Mithras.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew, the people who wanted to build their building thought, there's a Roman ruin here. So they took time out, dug it, and found the remains of the temple. And they had found other bits that showed there was a temple of Mithras nearby, and they put it all together and
Wow.
realized this was a temple of Mithras. It only survived about 200 years from about 200 AD to about 400 AD. But of course, as you know, the cult of Mithras only allowed men in.
Yes.
And it was vying with Christianity, who allowed anybody in.
Right.
Right.
Mithraism did not survive, and a few centuries later, a church was built on top of that site.
Yeah, as often happens.
As often is.
Yeah. Have you incorporated the mysteries of Mithras into any of your stories?
I'm so glad you asked. I've just written a book called The Time Travel Diaries.
Oh.
Where
Okay.
I have a 12-year-old London schoolboy go back in time using the Mithraeum as a portal. Because my theory was, if you wanted to go back in time to Roman London and you put, say, a portal, on street level and steps, you'd fall 30 feet to get to Roman London. So you have to go down. And my theory was you have to find a place that's not just longitudinally and latitudinally empty, but altitudinally empty, the same space now as it was then, because you don't want to step into a wall or a column, do you?
Right.
Or fall 40 feet. So they put the portal in the nave of the Mithraeum, of the modern Mithraeum, which is exactly where the ancient one was, and they send him back by has to step through. And because I like to make life hard for my heroes, you have to go naked if you go back in time.
It makes sense.
I stole that idea from Terminator, of course.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Before we get too far along, I want to spend a lot of time on the books themselves, and we have so many questions about what kind of fiction you like and what authors you have met and so forth, and whom you admire in your guild. But before getting to that, I just want to ask, what was it like to be at Cambridge? And for a little bit of background, a lot of our listeners, and I think probably ourselves, there's a good deal of prestige attached to the British universities, Oxford and Cambridge. And we both have visited some of those places. They're so overwhelmingly impressive. So I'm wondering, what's an insider's look like from the time that you were there?
Well, I remember when I was at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, I had an English professor named J.K. Anderson who specialized in Greek armor. And he said, you should go to Cambridge rather than Oxford because it's much prettier and it's smaller, he said. So I managed, as I said, by the skin of my teeth to get a scholarship to Cambridge. And it is beautiful. And, there are buildings there that are twice as old as America. If you count, 70s, 76. But it is that kind of unreal world of academia, and I think Oxford is too. You're just always amazed by the architecture, by the evensong, and you hear these choirs of superb singers, young boys and older people, and just singing ancient hymns and psalms, and it's beautiful. But I love London. I'm in love with London. And when I left Cambridge and came to London eventually, I was on like a year long high. And I still am. We live right by the river. If I turn my there's the river.
There's the Thames right there.
Oh my goodness.
There, yep.
Now, are you on a houseboat, or how does that?
No, we're in an apartment. We're in an apartment in a place called Battersea or Wandsworth. Which is London, yeah. But again, London's got great public transport. So it was great being at Cambridge. It's great to visit Oxford. I love those places. I go back often and see, friends, and there are often classics conferences there.
Yes.
But I love London, still love it. And you can get to anywhere easily from here. And there's so much history, especially Roman history, right?
Have you visited the Wallace collection?
Yes. Yeah.
The Vincenzo Foppa fresco there of the young Cicero reading.
I don't know that one. I better go.
It's fabulous. It used to hang I'm told, over the desk of the bank in Milan. The Medici commissioned it, and now it's there at the Wallace collection. So
you're a big Cicero fan, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Not everyone shares that. He died too soon to appear in any of your books, so far as I know. But,
Yeah, he's, I think, yeah, I don't think I even mentioned Cicero. I have one book where I talk a lot about rhetoric.
mhm.
But I think, yeah, I don't even talk much about Cicero in that one. But I have a fun book where I go about the gestures of the orator and everything
Oh,
else.
yes. I saw some of those diagrams. Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I work in a lot of people, but no, and of course, I do work in Antony and Cleopatra into one of my books, but it turns out it's a fancy dress party that they're shipwrecked in Alexandria, and they're all dressed up like Antony and Cleopatra.
So it's 1999, and you get this idea. Why don't I write a Nancy Drew style mystery with a female heroine to be kind of a natural counterpart to the Harry Potter craze?
A balance, let's
A
say.
balance, yes. And then how did it develop from there? If you can tell us some of that story, please.
Yeah, essentially, because I've been wanting to be a screenwriter, I had been studying Hollywood plot structure, especially the hero's journey and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And I'd been listening to tapes by a brilliant script guru called John Truby. I want to give him a shout out. He changed my life. And I worked through trying to write a screenplay and wrote a couple of screenplays, which were no good, but I taught myself story structure in those
Mhm.
times. And then my sister suggested this idea, gave me the idea, and I immediately had my structure. Because if you're going to, I'm really interested in the setting, the world. I'm not even so interested in the character or the plot, but kids are interested in character or plot.
Yes.
So I had to come up with really great characters and a great plot. And I had this Hollywood story structure, the hero's journey, where the hero lives in an ordinary world. They dream they're called to more. They get a call to adventure. They refuse the call, but then the mentor comes and says, yes, you have to go, gives them a talisman. They cross the threshold, go to the world of adventure, have adventures, training montage, the visit to death. They grasp the elixir, they get the prize, and they return home again.
Wow, you got this down cold. You could do this in your sleep.
I've also written a book called How to Write a Great Story.
Ah, put that on my Amazon list.
Oh, that's excellent.
But then I was thinking these characters. I've got this girl, but I've got to have boys too, because I can't just have a girl main character, because then no boys will read the books. And so I thought, well, the girl can be like Nancy Drew, kind of bossy know-it-all, who's putting her nose in where she can be me, bossy know-it-all, impulsive, impetuous. And then I was looking at some of my favorite films, because I adore films, things like Star Wars, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz.
You're speaking Jeff's language now.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Harry Potter, the Hunger Games. Well, that hadn't come around yet, but these all fit. And I realized you often get a main character with about three sidekicks, three helpers: the faithful sidekick, the funny one, and the wild one.
Yeah.
And so, for example, in Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, the real sidekick is Toto, but of the three she meets, she's closest to Scarecrow.
Right.
Then you get the funny one, the Tin Man, who is equal to C-3PO in Star Wars.
Yes.
Right.
And then you get the wild one, the Cowardly Lion, who at first you think they're an opponent, but then they turn out to be a helper. But because they're a little bit wild, they're all out of control, and they're all in a cannon. They sometimes even betray you, like Chewbacca, who's a bit of a wild one.
It's like the centaur, Chiron.
Yes,
the centaur, right? The centaurs are. They present as wild, but they also can possess deep knowledge and will help you in the right circumstances, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a few years later, of course, Rick Riordan just hit pure gold by using the same structure and the same ideas. Yeah. And people, you can't say it's stealing because it's so deeply ingrained. It goes back to Homer. It goes back to Virgil. It goes back to everybody. So Flavia's she's the leader. The funny one is her Jewish Christian next door neighbor, Jonathan.
Right.
The early generation of when Christianity was just beginning to take hold, mainly among a Jewish population.
Right.
And then you've got her faithful sidekick is a beautiful enslaved person from Nubia. And I made a conscious decision to give her dark skin, even though I tell kids when I go into schools that slaves could be any color in ancient Rome.
Sure.
Because I wanted to give kind of hope to anyone who'd come from a background of slavery.
And you gave her a very recognizable name, which I think was wise as well, to call her Nubia from her,
which actually isn't her real name.
No, I didn't expect so.
In a later book that her real name is Shephenwepet, which is a proper Nubian name. And then Lupus is a little disabled. I knew I wanted a disabled character. And at first I thought I'd make him deaf, but then I realized that wouldn't be very exciting. They'd be shouting, "Lupus, watch out!" And he'd just be standing there. So then I thought, I'll make him mute. And a poem of Marshall, my fave guy, Marshall says to someone, "You cut out your slave's tongue because so they can't say what you did, but everyone knows what you did." Lucius or whatever his name is.
Right.
So I got the idea that my character Lupus would be mute and wouldn't be able to speak because someone had cut out his tongue.
He's a compelling character in the story. I like him quite a bit.
People say to me, "How could you do that? That's so violent." But kids love it. They're just so fascinated by him.
Well, of course, you didn't do it, really. It's just a reflection of one of the realities of the times.
And yet, I did do it because I'm the author.
Yes.
It reminds me of reading to my own boys the Lemony Snicket books, right, which are upfront with their darkness, right? Yeah, and the first page, he says, if you're expecting a story with a happy ending, you better shut the book now. And so, I mean, I love kids' books that have kind of a gritty realism to it, because I think kids, like you said, kids love it, and they can handle it, right?
And it's a challenge. It's a challenge walking that tightrope, really, between showing things, giving them a hint of what it was like, but you can't go all the way there. That would be too much.
Right. If we could go back just to the hero's journey a minute, it's something I've long been fascinated with, and I want to ask you a question that my mid students often ask me when I talk about Campbell and I talk about Jung, and they say. And when they start recognizing, they realize that in so many of the stories they love, they start recognizing this pattern. And they always ask themselves, well, why is it then, if we keep telling the same story over and over again, why does it not get stale? Why does it continue to grip us? And I wonder if you've thought about that, not just using kind of the archetypal structure, but thinking about, well, why does this keep working?
Yes, absolutely. I've thought about it. One reason is I think it's in our DNA. Mm-hmm. I think if you think God created man, I think God is the supreme storyteller. Mm-hmm. And I think he almost implanted it in us. But on a less spiritual realm, that's how we learn. Every day we have desires, don't we? And we want things. And usually we have to struggle to get them. And we don't like conflict in our real life. But that's the way we learn, is through conflict and through battles. I think that hero's journey mirrors on a grand scale our everyday life. You know, the little desires, the struggle, the knowledge, the revelation. And so it's part of how we live. It's also in a world where we've lost our instincts, a way we can tell each other around the campfire to be careful of what to be careful of and what to watch out for. It's a kind of way of preparing us to go into the world.
Right. That puts me in mind of two things. First of all, it raises the question, who are my sidekicks on my hero's journey? And am I their sidekick? I'm sure I am. And then the second thing is, at the beginning of Thieves of Ostia, I was struck by how successfully you take us in medias res. It's the second page, maybe the third page, and all of a sudden we are in the middle of the necropolis, and there's danger and suspense. I thought that was really nicely done.
In fact, that opening, thank you very much. That opening is it's like the beginning of The Wizard of Oz, where there's a little mini mystery at the beginning. He has to go on a mini hero's quest to get Turbo back. And what I've done there is I'm introducing her as a detective, and she goes on a little mini hero's journey where she crosses the threshold from the safety of her house into the necropolis, which is like the visit to death.
Yes.
And there's an opponent who is not an evil opponent, the magpie who stole the ring.
Right.
And she's got to overcome various little hurdles. And her moment of revelation This is what John Truby taught me, that it's not about just getting the prize. It's about what you learn when you go on the quest. And she does get the ring back, but what she realizes when she's up the tree and found her dad's ring in the magpie's nest is she realizes she's a good detective. And this is what she's called to do. This is her calling in life. And then she discovers the earring, which is worth a lot of money, which she's going to sell and save this poor enslaved girl by buying her, not to have her as a slave, but as a companion and a friend.
Right.
And even by the third book, she sets her free, you know. But so yeah, I've got a mini hero's journey. And in fact, what I realized is that each chapter, even each scene, hits these beats of the hero's journey. And what I love, the hero's journey has up to 18 beats, but what I love about John Truby, my mentor, he talks about 7 plot beats, which I have used over and over. And again, it's in this book, How to Write a Great Story. He says your hero always starts off with a problem. They then have a desire. They see something that will solve the problem. 3 is the step that you often forget. It's the opponent. Someone's going to clash with the hero as they go for their desire to solve the problem. And it doesn't have to be an evil opponent. It can be your brother or sister. And in fact, in most of our daily life, it's our intimates, our friends, our family.
Right.
Then the middle of the story is the plan. The hero comes up with a plan to defeat the opponent, to get the desire to solve the problem. And that often involves the journey, the movement. Near the end of the story, you get step 5, the battle, when the hero finally has the final conflict with the opponent.
And this would be the scene, if I'm interrupting, this would be the scene with the, I don't want to give it away, a spoiler, but the trident with the 3 dogs' heads.
That's in the main story. But even in this first chapter, the battle with Flavia and the magpies, just when she's following him through the woods.
Got it.
She doesn't even touch him. But if she gets to his nest, she wins the battle. If he keeps his nest a secret, he wins the battle. So then she waits for him to fly away, climbs up, and she gets the reward. But again, what she gets is 6. Step 6 is the knowledge or the self-revelation. And in many films, John Truby is just so brilliant. He says the self-revelation is often in silence. And I've just been rewatching The Godfather. And Michael's moment, one of his big moment of self-revelation, is when he's standing outside the hospital with the baker. They're pretending they're the bodyguards because they realize his father's in the hospital wounded. Don Corleone is wounded, and the bad guys, the other families, are about to make a hit. Michael's got to stand there and pretend he knows what's happening, that he's got a gun. Right. His moment is they drive away. The baker takes out cigarettes and his hand is shaking and he's trying to light it. Michael takes his lighter and his hand is perfectly steady. And in silence, he looks and he realizes this is what he's called to do. He can do this, a revelation in silence. So Flavia realizes, doesn't tell anyone, she's a good detective. And then the next step, the final step of 7 is the new level. Your hero either ends up on a higher level or a lower level, happy or sad ending. Lemony Snicket's made a living by ending on a lower level.
Yes, yeah.
She realizes she's a good detective. She's got the ring, but then suddenly she hears this panting and looks down to see half wild dogs surrounding the tree. So she's got a new problem. So we start back with step 1 again, a new problem. A new desire to get away from the wild dogs. Her opponent, who's her opponent? The dogs. What's her plan? She yells for help, etc. And then she meets Jonathan, who saves her. So these steps cycle over and over. And once you see them, it's such a powerful engine for driving your story.
Yeah.
So you wrote the first book. You searched for an agent, a publisher, or they searched for you. And then I'm curious how things kind of took off from then, from that point, because you've shown us the book, How to Write a Great Story. You've talked about Truby. In some sense, anybody who can read and write could do this, but not anybody can have this kind of success. It's kind of unusual. You already credited the goddess Fortuna Stulta, right? Dumb luck. But clearly there's something else going on, right? Because not everyone's ideas take off like this. So I'm curious about what were the next steps, and when did you kind of sit back and think, Wow, this is going really well. I'm pleased with what I've been able to accomplish.
Hubris. I just thought, I've got a good idea.
Right.
I remember thinking when my sister said that, and I thought Nancy Drew and Nature, I remember thinking, if I can pull this off, it'll be a hit. And I have a great story. I love reading books on writing, and I read somewhere Jeffrey Archer. Have you heard of him?
I don't know that name.
He's a very popular British author, and he's massively popular, and he just turns them out. And someone went up to him at a party once, and they say, I could do what you do. And he said, well, then go ahead and do it. And the point is, yes, anyone can write. It's a craft, not an art. What it requires is one thing, self-discipline. You got to sit down and make yourself do it. And I often tell kids, they say, give me a tip about writing. I say, train yourself to write. Make it a habit as regular as brushing your teeth, to write every day and sit down and do it. And again, I was lucky because I started becoming a writer before social media.
Yeah.
And I shortened times, attention spans. I don't think I could do it now. So what I did after I got the ideas, I wrote the whole first draft in the last 2 weeks of the summer holiday. I've never written a book that fast before or after. My husband had published a nonfiction book with someone who was an editor of cookery books and stuff. And I sent it to her, and she said, yeah, I don't usually do fiction. She said, when my husband said his wife had a book, but she said her heart sank. But then she read it and said, yeah, I could do something with this. And so essentially I sent the whole first manuscript with ideas for 5 other books in a series, and I had an idea. Each one could take place, have a different Roman theme. One would be about slavery and the eruption. One would be about the eruption of Vesuvius. One would be about the Great Fire of Rome. In fact, the 2 years of Titus's reign were packed with real exciting events, and including the opening of the Colosseum.
Right.
Yes.
Amazing stuff. Such a rich period.
Yeah.
Thank you, Flavians. So I put together, she sent in the whole first draft with idea for 5 more. And amazingly, within a few months, we had a 6-book deal with Orion Children's Books. And so again, it was just my ignorance of not thinking this is going to be hard, thinking I could do this, and riding the J.K. Rowling wave of success.
Now, Jeff, it's time for the ads, but we don't have a funny segue. Not that any of them were funny.
We don't. This is kind of a special episode. We have a special guest, so I think that's okay.
How about this?
Okay.
Speaking of no segue, it's time for the ads.
Well done. This episode of Ad Nauseam is brought to you by Hackett Publishing. Hackett Publishing, they've been in business for 53 years, as long as I have been on this planet. They have their offices in Indianapolis and Cambridge, Massachusetts. We love these guys. They've been with us since the beginning. They took a chance on this little podcast of ours, and they stuck with us. And it's not just that, but they produce great stuff.
They do.
Say a little bit about Hackett, Dave. What do you like?
How about a limerick?
Oh, no, really? Okay,
You don't want a limerick?
No, really, Dave? You have one? Let's do it.
Okay. For Plato and Livy and Sallust, don't leave all your books in the ballast, but sail straight ahead to Hackett, we said, else your literary tastes will grow calloused.
Nicely done. I believe you wrote that.
I did.
Fantastic.
When you say nicely done, what you mean is Sallust, ballast, calloused.
Yes. I don't think probably anybody in the history of humanity has rhymed those words together. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I like Hackett that they support this podcast. They are in favor of not canceling, but promoting the classics. They have fantastic books at a reasonable price, attractive, accurate translations, sometimes multiple translations for a given author. Say the Ovid Metamorphoses, there's the Stanley Lombardo, and there is also the Ambrose edition.
Yep.
We love their stuff.
We do. So listeners, their immense catalog is available to you at very reasonable prices. Go check it out. HackettPublishing.com. That's HACKETT Publishing.com. Find the books that you want
and type in what coupon code do we need for them?
AN.
Yes.
You ready?
Yeah.
2024.
That's right.
It's a brand new year. It's a brand
code.
new chance to buy books. Brand new code. AN 2024.
So drop that in into the box that requests it, and you will get 20% off your order and free shipping. Check it out.
This episode of Ad Nauseam is also brought to you by the good folks, Mark Helweg and company at Ratio Coffee. Jeff, did you have any coffee this morning?
I did, and I brewed it up with my Ratio 8 machine. I did. How about yourself?
Well, I thought about using my Dack and Blecker.
Yeah.
That was a hard pass.
Right.
Senior Coffee.
Yeah. No.
Hard pass. I thought about going down to Barstucks.
No.
No. The Bean and Bagelized Barnery.
No. Did you go down there?
Yes.
You did?
But they weren't serving any good coffee, so I came back.
Sounds good. Okay.
I thought about picking up something from the manufacturer of Scorch Pads.
Oh, you did?
You know who they are?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Fire Down Below.
Fire Down Below. Yeah.
That was a hard pass.
Yeah.
Finally, I thought maybe I should use a Gurek machine.
Oh, right. They have those little, what are they called?
The single-serve marsupods.
The marsupods.
They got the marsupods. There's, I think their slogan is, there's a little Joey of coffee in every sip.
Right, so you went with that, I take it.
No, I stuck with the Ratio 8.
Of course you did.
It's got a nice oyster shell color. I've got the hulking flagon into which my coffee is easily decanted up through the metallic veins, down through the Fibonacci head without a hint of
a brackish tang.
There you go.
That's right. Yeah, same thing. Mine has the stainless steel accents.
Yes.
That hulking flagon, which keeps the coffee warm for hours. You don't need that scorch pad.
No.
The Fire Down Below. Forget
That's
it.
right.
Right. It keeps everything kind of natural and fresh. Can't say enough about it. So, Dave, if our listeners are interested in one of these awesome machines, what should they do?
Well, they should go to ratiocoffee.com, RATIO coffee.com, based out in Portland, Oregon. All the machines are handmade with the highest quality materials. They can look at the Ratio 8, that's the flagship model, the Millennium Falcon. They can look at the Ratio 6, which is a little more convenient price point. Or they can wait until the Ratio 4 comes out, which is not going to be too long.
Yeah, that's imminent, as I understand.
It's imminent.
Yes.
That's correct. And this is going to be a fantastic machine. And we understand, listener, that you like coffee and you want to participate in the literary and caffeinated lifestyle. But these machines, they're not cheap. They're an investment. The Ratio 4 is going to thread that needle, I think.
Yeah.
So go to the website, check it out, see what you like, and enter this coupon code, Jeff.
ANCO5K.
What does the K stand for?
That stands for coffee in a kind of a whimsical kind of way. No.
Perhaps.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's hard. What?
It's tough. Kong.
Kong, like as in king?
Yeah. It's the king of coffee makers.
Okay, I like that better. That works.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Jeff, we should probably also say a couple things about where the listener can find Caroline's excellent books.
Indeed. Where would that be?
Well, the Roman Mysteries series, that would be the Thieves of Ostia and the Assassins of Rome and so forth. These are published by Orion Books. So if you go to romanmysteries.com, I think that's where you can find Caroline's books. And we have a signed copy of one of these that we're going to give away to one of our listeners as soon as we figure out the special social media for it.
Excellent.
Mishka's going to help us out, but we have a signed copy of one of Caroline's books to give to one of our lucky listeners.
Excellent. Very, very good.
And what about the other books, Jeff? The Night Raid and the one that you especially like?
The Queen of the Silver Arrow? Yes. Where do those come from?
So these are published by Barrington Stoke.
Okay.
Which frankly sounds a little made up, but it's probably some British publisher. They break every day at 4 for high tea,
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah, it sounds like
But anyway, Barrington Stoke, I assume it's available from that river-based book emporium.
You can find all of these there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Caroline Lawrence's wonderful books. And so because she has been so generous in being our guest today, we want to encourage the listener to go check them out. They are excellent stories.
All right, Jeff. So what else, as we get back into it,
Yeah.
would you like to ask Caroline?
So Caroline, you have this really interesting identity as a kind of an American identity and a British identity. And one of the things I was curious about is, as you have talked to American readers, British readers, audiences on both sides, do you recognize kind of a noticeable difference in how they kind of respond to this, respond to the material? My sense is that the British Isles has always struck me as much more of kind of a myth-soaked place. I mean, you have, you talk about, finding a Mithraeum in the basement of Bloomberg's, the Roman stuff is right there. And America, of course, doesn't have that kind of, classical antiquity kind of baked into the pie. And I'm just wondering if you've noticed that kind of difference kind of coming out in how kids or readers, audiences have responded to your stories.
I think it's not so much the myth of the place we live in, because I think everybody loves the Greek myths. I think kids just everybody adores the Greek myths, or Native American mythology, or Norse mythology.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Kids love that stuff, like they love dinosaurs,
Yeah.
Yes.
But the one reason I'm glad I live in England is I think, I don't want to upset anyone in America, but I think kids are just so much better readers here.
Mm.
The education is just amazing. They read my books in third grade here.
Do you think it's because the weather there is so poor? They're staying inside and reading?
That's exactly why. It's so rotten. You don't want to go out and skateboard.
No, just curl up with a book.
Curl up with a book. That's exactly right. And I remember thinking, gosh, I couldn't do this in California,
No.
I'd be out there walking around, but it's raining and it's cold. I'm going to open my book of Greek mythology, or my Virgil, or my Cicero, or my Apuleius, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent.
She's referencing you there, Jeff.
Apuleius. I love a good Apuleius shout out. Absolutely. Yeah.
It seldom happens that one of our guests is a fan of what we're doing. That's so kind. Yeah. We're so appreciative, Caroline.
Well, like you, and I call myself an evangelist for the classics. I want people to fall in love.
Yes.
You could live 100 lifetimes and never exhaust the classical world.
Right.
Agreed.
It's so rich. And I keep, I've been studying it almost all my life, and I keep coming across authors. Who's Lactantius? I've never heard of him. And he's the Christian Cicero. Oh my gosh.
That's right. Yep. Right. His milky smooth style.
For a few years, I was into Galen, the Greek-speaking doctor in the Roman world. Oh my gosh, he's like an ancient Sherlock Holmes. He could walk into the sick room and figure out what was wrong by clues.
Right.
And by what the slave was taking out in the chamber pot and stuff like that, and the dregs in a cup on the window.
So the ancient doctor, your character Mordecai in Thieves of Ostia, I hear that by the end of the story, he's headed off to the Bay of Neapolis. So I hope he appears in subsequent stories. I thought the fact that you presented him first as a Jew and then as a Christianized Jew, that was very clever, and I didn't see it coming, frankly. How did you make that decision, if I may ask?
Well, I'm half Jewish.
Okay.
I grew up as an atheist, and when a few years after I left Cambridge, I had a kind of amazing conversion experience at a dinner party, and kind of became a born-again Christian. And I think the thing that hit me the most was, apart from feeling the morning after I said the prayer, everything seemed fresh and clean and bright, like when you're a kid and you run outside on a Sunday morning and the kids sparkling on the ground. The other thing that really struck me was, I opened my Bible. I'd tried to read it before, and it was alive. It became alive. And I suddenly realized, this is actually my story. I'm half Jewish. So I started studying biblical Hebrew, and I got the same experiences with Greek and Latin. It opened the world to me. So I thought, well, this period when Vesuvius erupts is just 40 years roughly after the crucifixion. And very first Christians are running around the world. And Paul was in Italy maybe in 62 AD, and my book is 15 years later and stuff. So I thought, this is great. I can what did the very first generations of Christianity look like when it was still mainly Jewish? And it was just another sect of Judaism at that point, like the Essenes or the Sadducees.
Sure. Right. That was nicely done in the book. It was very artful, I have to say. It was not heavy-handed. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you. it's again a hard line a tightrope. You don't want to be
Correct.
preachy, but you want to show what it might have been like. So yeah.
Yes, I thought you did that very well because I've read accounts that are, I guess, ham-fisted. There is a place for proselytization. I don't think a novel is the best place for that. And I don't think that that's how the story was told. I think of, this is kind of a heavy literary reference. I'm not trying to show off, but I won't be to you, but I mean for our listeners. In the Brothers Karamazov, there's a scene where Alyosha, one of the brothers, reads from a portion in John, and he has a kind of epiphany, and it's a revelation moment in his life. And I remember how powerfully impactful that was when I first read it. So there are definitely ways to do it well. And I would say on a smaller scale than Dostoevsky, no offense, you did it really well in Thieves of Ostia. And
what's really hard, David, is writing it when you can use an allegory like C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That's such a powerful book. But one of the books I want to write that I'm really struggling with is what was Jesus like as a teenager?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a minefield. It's very hard.
Right.
And I've been studying, it's right in my period. I've been studying, ancient Israel, again, the archaeology of the period.
Right.
Nazareth was a short walk from Sepphoris, this very Hellenistic town on a hill. Joseph was probably not a carpenter, but a builder. The word is tekton in it.
Right.
And so I imagine them going up and working in Sepphoris every day, where there might have been sophists walking around talking about Neoplatonists and people like that. And Jesus probably spoke not just Aramaic, but obviously Greek and Hebrew. So
and possibly Latin.
And I'm trying to figure out how to tell that story without, again, being bashing people on the head.
Sure. Well, that's really interesting. And I'm sure, as you know, is that I think this is one of the places where a fairly typical hero's journey doesn't help you, because it's so many hero's journeys follow the pattern of you get maybe a handful of stories of the hero as a young kid that shows potential, and then you kind of get this zip fast forward. Oh, the hero's 30. And now is going to walk the journey, right? So I mean, that's the story of Christ. I mean, the story of the Buddha kind of follows that same kind of pattern, but it also kind of leaves this blank page waiting to be written, right? Mm-hmm. We have that one story of Jesus as 12,
about 12 years
in
old
the temple,
Luke 2,
and then Luke tells us he's 30 and he starts his mission path towards his death and resurrection.
Of course, this has been done before, poorly, in the so-called apocryphal Gospels. There's a lot of stuff between age 12 and 30.
Yeah,
but those, of course, were left out of the canon.
Yeah.
But,
you look up later stories about Jesus' childhood. He's like making birds out of mud. And
yes,
correct.
And then the worst thing is he's being like Elijah, and he's striking down people and killing people left, right, and center for Jesus and bullying him.
No ring of authenticity.
Right. Although Jesus' life does follow the hero's journey, I had this revelation that his big revelation is the moment he comes up out of the Jordan after being baptized by John.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." And he then crosses the threshold. Where does he go?
He goes back to his hometown, does he not? He goes to Capernaum.
He's just come up out of the Jordan.
Oh, he goes out into the wilderness, of course.
He goes into the wilderness to be tested for 40 days and 40 nights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I think it suddenly hit him. Oh my gosh, I've been reading about this Messiah character. That's me.
Mm.
And just imagine if you put all the hints in the Old Testament, all those prophetic statements, and the suffering you're going to have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's an amazing moment. And then he's got, there's a visit to death. There's a resurrection, it's got all the steps.
Yeah.
Anyway, but again, it's going to be tricky to do because I don't want to do that, but I want to do when he's younger. And one thing I think the film Ben-Hur did brilliantly was it never shows his face.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it always leaves it to your imagination. And that's so much more powerful. So one thing toying with this, that my time traveler goes back to meet Kid Jesus, right?
Mm.
Never actually meets him, but he meets people who've been influenced by him. Or
Right.
something.
Right.
But it's how do you tread that line? I wrote a whole first draft, and my agent said nope, and I agreed. I said nope, you're right. This doesn't work. So it's not easy. It's getting
Yeah.
harder and harder.
Yeah. So as your books grew in popularity and in readership, you got some additional opportunities. Two of them were adapted for the BBC. Is that right?
Well, actually, what happened was my first series was the most popular, and that
Okay.
they adapted 10 of the books, I think, out of 17 in all,
Mm-hmm.
as a TV series. But for a variety of reasons, it didn't really take off. But so my big success was with my first series, The Roman Mysteries. And since then, I've never sold as well, but I've had fun. I've made my living as a writer, at least
Yes.
in the ancient world. And then my last three projects have all been on commission. They've been nonfiction. One was a retelling of Aesop's fables, which I had fun because I went back to.
Mm-hmm.
And the Greek of Aesop's fables is koine. It's easy Greek. And then another one, I've been asked to write a book about London for kids. So, oh yeah, that's great. And my latest project, I'd love to pick your brains on this. It's someone who read my books growing up is now a commissioning editor and asked me to write a book about the Greek gods. Like no one's ever done that before, right?
Well, there's always more room, right?
Guess she asked me to write
the stories have to be retold. So,
and she wants it for adults rather than kids, and especially for adults whose kids probably know a lot more about the Greek than they do,
because they've all read Rick Riordan among others.
Exactly. And now there's a kind of new wave of retelling of the feminine, Circe and Natalie Haynes's books about Medusa as a kind of, kind of almost feminist, a new take. So I'm writing a book about the Greek gods, and I've got to do it as the kind of bouillon cubes of Greek gods, boiling them down to their essentials, just a kind of a primer. So I wondered who's your favorite Greek god or goddess?
Jeff?
My favorite, I say this to every myth class. So when we'll spend a specific class period talking about specific gods, I always say to them, you might think that the natural place to start with talking about Greek gods is Zeus, but I always start with Athena. Athena's always been my favorite, just because of the links between the goddess and Athens itself, and the archaeology and the wealth of Western civilization that came out of Athens. And a lot of it has to do with kind of the radically different way that the ancient Athenians viewed their relationship to Athena than how so many of the other Greeks saw their relationships to other gods. And so I found her endlessly fascinating.
So I'm going to cheat and mention two if I can.
Oh, okay.
The first one is probably, I'm getting a look from Jeff here. The first one is probably obvious, and that's Apollo. I really like Apollo primarily because of the statue in the Temple of Zeus at Olympia, that pediment where he's in the battle against the centaurs, the Lapis and the centaurs, and Apollo comes down and he has this entirely dispassionate look on his face. Exactly.
That's the one where he's doing
exactly.
that. Yeah.
And he's reaching over with his right arm, holding at bay the forces of savagery and rapine and barbarism, and yet there's no emotion on his face.
Well, it's like Michael Corleone lighting the guy's cigarette.
I guess it's very similar to that, yes. And now I know that Apollo has his Dionysian side, chasing Daphne and doing other horrible things, but he's the god of music, and I think there's something really fascinating about that. And then to cheat, the second one is a very minor character from Ovid, the character of Vertumnus, who is the gentleman that guards the garden, and he is the suitor of Pomona, who is one of the nymphs of the countryside. And Ovid turns him into like a woodland Cicero, and he tries to get inside the garden and pitch woo to Pomona, and he's arguing, about how wonderful, in the disguise of an old woman, how wonderful Vertumnus is, and then he takes off his mask.
He's his own wingman.
There you go. Exactly. I think that's a fascinating character, mostly because of Ovid's brilliance. It really wins the day.
Ovid, I'm doing little boxes in this book, and I have a
Mm-hmm.
box of Greek mythology versus Ovidian mythology. He makes his own myths, doesn't he? I mean,
Yes, he does.
Some of our best known myths are from him, the way that Psyche and Cupid is for Eros is from Apuleius alone. Right. He's our only source, isn't he, for that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Although he does appear, that they do appear on vases. Does Vertumnus, what does he look like, David?
Well, he's a woodland nymph. He's a woodland faun, excuse me. And
so he's got the goat legs and everything? Little horns, maybe?
Yes, he does, although that's not how he's presented in Ovid, but in some of the artistic representations. Of course, he is the inspiration for C.S. Lewis's Mr. Tumnus in the first book of the Narnia Chronicles, where he's completely desexualized, even though in Ovid, he's a very libidinous character. Of course, Lewis doesn't present him that way in a children's story. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, I actually have a line in my manuscript. I'm just looking at that about how he came up with the idea. It's the author C.S. Lewis once said the idea for the book came to him following a mental picture he had of a fawn in the snow with umbrella and parcels.
He's a witty man, Lewis. Absolutely.
Fantastic.
So I wanted to read you a recent review, Caroline. This is so recent. It was done within the last 2 hours. This is a very fresh review from a child's perspective of your book, The Night Raid. And this has never before been published because my daughter wrote it this morning. She read the book in about 25 minutes, and she said, Dad, are you going to read this one? I said, I'm out of time. Can you just read it for me? And can you just give me a review? And so here's what she says. The Night Raid is a very interesting book. It starts very dramatically. A young boy named Rye is trying to pull a sword from his father's grip, his dead father's grip. He finds another boy who helps him and his mother escape the burning city. They try to make a life in New Troy. Then Rye and the boy who helped him have to go on a night raid to bring help to their besieged people. In the end, they are immortalized by Virgil in his poetry.
Wow, nice review.
I think it's pretty good. Yeah. So, there's nothing snarky. Reviewers can sometimes be snarky. They can say things like, this is the book no one should have written, or, words to that effect. But she liked it very much.
Thank you. That's really encouraging. I kind of wanted to do about 10 years ago, a retelling of the Aeneid for kids.
Mm-hmm.
And my publisher said, no, nobody's reading Bronze Age books now. And then after that came all these Bronze Age books. But
right.
Never mind. And I thought, so because she shot that idea down, I thought, well, I'll do two standalone books from the Aeneid where they die at the end. So it's got to be a standalone book. And one of them was of Nisus and Euryalus, or Rye, because it's for dyslexic kids. And the other one was the story of Camilla. So they all die at the end. So those are my two standalone tributes to Virgil.
Right.
That was fun because all the materials in Virgil, it's in the Aeneid, and I just now have to retell it in kind of order in a way.
Right.
Hero's journey and everything.
Yeah, and speaking of Camilla, I mean, we have to keep an eye on the clock here a little bit. We want to be respectful of your time, although I have the feeling that the three of us could talk together for about another 10 hours, frankly.
Indeed.
Jeff and I both had the chance to read Queen of the Silver Arrow, and so we'd like to talk about that a little bit. Jeff, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I would like to ask, what drew you to Camilla? I mean, in our own series on the podcast that we did on the Aeneid, I found revisiting Camilla particularly fascinating, and I love the idea that there's some mystery about whether she was an invention of Virgil himself, or that she had some kind of pre-existence in Roman mythology. But one of the many things that makes her so unique. But I just wonder what personally kind of drew you to the character of Camilla.
Well, I mean, she's great. First of all, she grows up in the woods with a little mini bow and arrow and little mini tiger skin.
Yeah,
she's like a little mini Diana, goddess of the hunt, really, or a mini Amazon. So what's not to like? The reason I chose Camilla is she dies, so it's a standalone. There's a beginning and an end. The reason I chose Nisus and Euryalus is they die. And at the beginning, I wrote the night raid first, and I started with, I think it's Nisus narrating, a bit like Sunset Boulevard. He's dead, but he's narrating the story, right?
Mm.
So it's the opening. They killed me,
Right.
And they say when a sword punches you, it feels like a fist punch. Well, it doesn't. It feels like a cold bronze metal popping your organs and scraping your ribs,
Ah.
But I thought with Camilla, I don't want to do it first person, her telling the story. So I decided, she mentions her friend Akka, her best friend Akka, maybe twice. Virgil mentions her maybe twice. So I thought I'll do it from her point of view, and she tells the story of Camilla. So, and again, it's like a code or a puzzle. You've got your story structure. You've got to figure out whose point of view it'll be, what the main beats will be, what the main conflict, the battle will be, what the visit to death will be, what the revelation will be at the end.
Yeah.
So it was just fascinating to go through the Aeneid and comb it and get all the details. I think Camilla's in books 7 and 11. So that's easy to remember, 7, 11,
Right. Yeah. Convenient.
Yeah, convenient. Sure. Nisus and Euryalus are book 9. So
that's right.
This is the back end of the Aeneid that very few people read.
Exactly.
Right.
So again, I did it I hoped to get people interested. Oh, I'm going to read those books of the Aeneid and find out more. And I loved it. It has one of my favorite things is, I think we all love the transformation scene where they take the grubby girl, who's all dirty and her hair is tangled or
her
she's
teeth
wearing glasses.
even, right?
Her teeth, yeah. And they beautify the beauty montage where they make her people, you get it in Miss Congeniality. You get it.
Of course.
Jeff, when are we going to get the beauty treatment?
I think it's too late for us.
It's too late.
Yes.
Oh, if you take off your glasses, I'll say, "Wow, you guys are handsome."
No, that's right. Yeah,
Just taking off the glasses. So
you're funny.
The beauty treatment was great. That was so fun writing that scene where they teach her table manners and stuff like that. So I had a huge amount of fun writing that. Yeah.
I love the detail. I mean, one of the scene of Camilla's father throwing her across the river attached to a spear is such a vivid thing. I love the detail that you brought out, is that when her father gets to the other side, little Camilla's giggling because she thought it was a game. Right?
It looked like a little larva in a cork
cocoon. Yes.
Cocoon.
I thought that was fantastic.
Nice touch.
But any other baby would be screaming of terror. But Camilla, this is where it's at. Like, throw it again, Dad.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yep. So as you became very successful, you were elected, I think, to the presidentship of the Classical League there in Great Britain. Is that right? Following on.
They do a different one every year, and they have a scholar one year and a non-scholar the next.
Okay.
So it was just a kind of a little honorific, which I'm very grateful
I see.
for. So that
now, did this give you daily access to the Queen or anything like that, or was it?
Yes, I went and had tea with her every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never met the Queen.
Well, hey, I think we want to be considerate of your time. And so I want to thank you so much, Carolyn, for joining us. We would love to have you on again in the future to talk about new projects down the pike. This has been just a blast.
Yes, absolutely.
I have so much admiration for both of you. I would love to be, if you ever want to do a series on the Greek gods and goddesses, I will be your third wheel of your tricycle.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Fantastic.
I would love to do that and just spend more time with you. And as you said, I could spend more than 10 hours.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do have one question about your background. And by that, I mean your actual background. There's a pillow there in the back, which looks to be the eye of the Cyclops or something. Now I see.
It's an apotropaic.
That's my futon. It's apotropaic.
Oh, yes. Scaring us away.
You can see there's a little face there, yeah?
I like that with the nose.
Oh, yes.
The mask is apotropaic.
I see that too.
And I might even have a mormalukion. That's a
mormalukion. Yes. Very frightening.
The masks you get all over ancient Greece and Rome, you find skeleton masks. They're not actors' masks. Yeah, they are actors' masks, but find them on baby beakers, oil lamps, frescoes, revolving things called
Right.
oscularia. They're to keep away evil. They reflect back the evil eye. And when I was translating Aesop's fables, I found the word is a mormolukion. Mormo is a kind of female demon, and lukos is wolf. And
Yes.
they're like a bogeyman. And the
Right.
word for those is a mormolukion. And once you see them everywhere, it's Medusa's face, it's the Gorgonean and everything.
Right.
It strikes me right now for the first time that they are ancient emojis, right?
They are ancient emojis for get back, demon.
Yes,
Yeah.
stick it wherever you in the thumb or the crying face or the laughing face. So anyway,
Well, yeah, Caroline, if you want to come on and spend 5 hours talking about liminal spaces, and I'm all for it.
That's one of
I
my
might have to
things.
take a break myself, be part of that. Maybe
Liminal
take a nap or
spaces,
something.
Crossing the threshold. It's
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Caroline. We are just thrilled you could join us. Your generosity and kindness, very grateful.
Well, I'm
Really
looking
appreciate it.
forward to doing Latin per diem every day now. So I will hear your dulcet, and I love your podcast. I'm a huge fan of your podcast, and so is
Thank you so much.
the editor who commissioned that book. She's now a fan, so we're hoping to
Thank you.
keep up the
Excellent.
fan base in London and England.
I have to say, you gave us one of the nicest compliments ever, which was something along the lines of, "I like your podcast, even the terrible or despite the terrible puns." That was delightful. That
I love
warmed the cockles of my heart.
The dad puns are great.
All right. Well, take care, Caroline. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.
Thank you for
Bye.
having me on. Bye-bye.
Of course.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, Jeff, we got to get out of here, don't we?
We do, because what's that sound coming?
yeah.
There's a banging on the door.
There's fists and hammering and the kicking of panels and so forth. I think that's the National Union to Prevent Amateur Podcasting.
Wait, NewPap is on?
NewPap is here.
NewPap is here?
An angry mob, and they didn't even call ahead.
No.
They're trying to throw us out of the vomitorium. So if we value life and limb, we better wrap this up.
We better wrap this quickly. Yes.
Because we don't want to run afoul of NewPap.
Indeed. No. They have a long reach.
They do.
So, Dave, before we get out of
Yes.
here, tell us something about the Moss Method and LLPSI, would you?
Sure. Yeah. So Moss Method for Greek is a program I've developed based on a 19th century public domain textbook by Charles Melville Moss. The approach is simple. Greek does not have to be complicated. Yes, you need to learn forms, but you don't have to learn them all at once and then practice on a couple stale sentences. You can learn them naturally, a little bit at a time, as you are reading engaging stories. Things from Xenophon, Herodotus, Lucian, Aesop, lots of great stories.
Yeah.
And so I put this program together. Go to mossmethod.com. It's divided into 4 modules. The cost for entry, I think, is relatively low. The first module includes 40 video lessons, 6 quizzes, 2 exams, lots of great, rich, deep instruction delivered in a video format, self-paced, expert, and accessible. And it's got your favorite feature.
What, the Moffus hours,
The
right?
Moffus hours,
Yes.
that's right. Once a week, typically every Friday, with an occasional interruption. I meet with students from all over the world, and we study Greek together. You can ask me any questions you have about the New Testament, about a classical author, some patristic author. It's a great way to engage with a community of like-minded learners and advance your Greek.
Sounds great. And then how about LLPSI?
Yeah, so this is the Lingua Latina per se illustrata, the famous series by Hans Orberg, sold by Hackett. And I've developed a similar kind of video delivery course where I am teaching to 4 live students, and I record this, and then you can watch and follow along. So you get all the benefits of being in the classroom without the inconveniences and disadvantages. And those would be sometimes it's just too much pressure. You don't want to be on the spot. Maybe it doesn't fit your schedule. You can purchase this course and learn along with us as I detail all the fine points of Latin grammar and also teach some spoken Latin. So go to latinperdiem.com/LLPSI. Check out my more than 2,000 free videos and see if you'd like to sign up for this course.
That sounds great. So, listeners, if you want to follow Ms. Lawrence's lead and make this part of a New Year's resolution of learning Greek and Latin or brushing up on your Greek and Latin, this is a great way to do it.
You're very generous, Jeff. Thank you.
So we got some people to thank.
Yes, we do.
As always, our intrepid engineer, Mishka, putting this together so tightly and at lightning speed.
Yes, going to make it sound great.
Yes, and how about those musicians?
Yeah.
Yeah. Scott Vinzen, Ken Tamplin.
That whittly diddly guitar screaming, blazing arpeggios, and the nice bumper music with the bass and the keyboards going together.
Right. And I think the listener should be reminded, this doesn't just fall out of the ether. You have these connections. You are connected, my friend.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you.
To these high rollers, man.
Yeah, well, the Lord has blessed me with some really nice friendships, generous people who share their talent with me, all undeserving, I got to say.
Excellent. Hey, listeners, if you want to shout out, if you got an idea for an episode, you got a question, you got a comment, you have a complaint, don't hesitate to contact us.
Wait a minute, really?
Well,
we're soliciting complaints? We don't want them to even hesitate?
Well, I mean, maybe not. With the complaints, if you have a complaint, sleep on it.
How about they count to 3 or 3,000 before they send us a complaint?
Fair enough.
Okay.
Right. So, but they can do this by writing to us. You can write to me at jeff@adnauseum.com. Don't forget the V. Or they can write to Dave.
Or you can write to Jeff at adnauseum.com. Don't forget the V. Or to me, same thing.
Yes.
You know the routine. You can get a Quai No Kent Do Kent t-shirt at our website. You can lurch with merch. You can get a hat, etc.
So, yes, don't hesitate to check us out. And Dave, next week, what do we got going on?
We got some thundering and rumbling up above. I don't know what's
Those guys
happening.
from New Pap.
Yeah, the New Pap. They're really eager to get in here. Next week, I'm not sure. Shall we return to Maru?
Yes, I think we definitely have some unfinished business there.
That's correct.
Yep.
And a lot of other things lined up. We had teased previously a seasonal Christmas themed episode with respect to Herod the Great.
Yeah.
We're going to put that on hold.
Yes.
Another Christmas will likely roll around, and we'll deal with it then.
Sounds good. And Dave, you have our gustatory parting shot.
Yes, this comes from one of my favorite authors, although there are some who like to throw shade against this fellow. I'm speaking of the great Charles Dickens. You know why I like him?
Why do you like him?
He's funny, and he can turn a phrase.
Okay.
One reason people dislike him, he was paid by the word when his stories were serialized, so he doesn't really know when to stop a sentence.
He was milking it.
Sometimes I think that's true. But this is what Charles Dickens says. We have had for breakfast toasts, cakes, a Yorkshire pie, a piece of beef about the size and much the shape of my portmanteau, tea, coffee, ham, and eggs.
That's a serious breakfast.
He's packing it in. Thanks, Charles.
Thanks for listening.